bem-vindos a este webinar da Harvard Business Review. A mente do líder, como liderar a si mesmo, seu pessoal e sua organização para obter resultados extraordinários. Esse webinar abre a nossa HBR Brasil Week deste ano. E quem vai estar conosco hoje é a Jacqueline Carter. Ela é sócia e diretora para a América do Norte da consultoria Potential Market, e cuja consultoria tem clientes como Cisco, Accenture, Royal Bank of Canada e vários outros. O tema central da nossa conversa hoje será a estratégia que as empresas vão ter ou já estão fazendo em relação aos seus funcionários. As pesquisas recentes mostram que 88% dos funcionários têm alguma queixa em relação aos seus líderes. Né? E 65% preferia ver o seu líder demitido do que ter um aumento de salário. Vejam bem, isso apesar das empresas gastarem no mundo todo bilhões de dólares por ano em desenvolvimento de liderança. Então, a Jacqueline, depois de estudar esse fenômeno com mais de 35 mil avaliações, fez uma pesquisa com 250 C-level people em diferentes empresas, ela chegou à conclusão que as empresas têm que mudar a sua estratégia e colocar as pessoas no centro dessa estratégia, porque neste momento, como é feito, as pessoas estão alienadas e as questões mais importantes para elas, como um propósito, uma coisa relevante delas, o caminho delas, não é levado em conta, apesar de todo esse investimento em treinamento de pessoas e desenvolvimento de liderança, como eu disse. Então, eu vou deixar aqui vocês com a Jacqueline, que vai nos contar como é que ela trabalhou e o resultado das pesquisas que ela andou fazendo. Hi, Jacqueline. So, I just introduced you, so now it's time for you to enlighten us. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Anna, and thank you and welcome everyone to this amazing week that HBR has put together for you. I know you're in for a fantastic week, and I'm so sorry that I'm not able to be there in person, but thank you, Anna, for providing this opportunity for me to be able to join you all through video. I'm very excited today to talk to you. As Anna said, our passion with Potential Project for a global organization, and our passion is really to help leaders and organizations better enhance performance, better enhance creativity, better enhance resilience through really understanding and better managing our minds. And what I want to talk to you today is specifically about leadership. And as Anna, I believe, mentioned, I'm sorry, my Portuguese is non-existent, so I'm assuming that she shared with you that we have just completed an amazing partnership, research project in partnership with HBR, looking at what it takes to be a successful leader in the 21st century. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to start to share my slides just to make sure that I've got the technology all working here. I want to start out with really looking this idea of really understanding the mind of leaders so that we can better lead ourselves, to be able to better lead our people, to better lead our organizations for extraordinary results. And what I'll do is I'll walk through some slides, and then Anna's going to ask me some questions. And also, I just want to say at the end of it, because I'm not there, if I was there, I would love to be able to get your feedback, and still via email at the end, I'll share my email. Would love to be able to see whether these concepts resonate in your organizations, in your context, and would love to have you be part of our continuing research in terms of understanding better how to help support organizations and leaders be more effective. But let's just jump right in terms of some of the context of what we found. One of the big findings is that, and this is from a global perspective, is that the workforce today has changed. I don't know, again, the ages of many of you in the audience, but I can certainly tell you that when I started in my career, I was with Deloitte Consulting many years ago, we weren't talking about being happy at work. We were grateful to have a job. I mean, I remember coming in on a Sunday afternoon, grateful to have the opportunity to have a few minutes with a partner to be able to help and support my development. And we're seeing now that this has radically changed. Now that we have workers that can basically sit from their living room and work for any organization in the world, they're asking for more. Talent is becoming more and more important. And it's more important for us as leaders to ask, what are talent looking for? And top talent, they're looking to be happy at work. They're looking to feel connected. They want to have a sense of meaning, have a sense of purpose. And so today, this is really the job of leaders to be able to create the conditions for people to experience these things. And this is really interesting because then when we turn our attention, so if that's what organizations, what people are looking for, then we have to ask ourselves, so how are we as leaders doing? And I'm sorry to say this, but it doesn't paint a very pretty picture. But I'll share with you some statistics. And what we've seen is that there really is a leadership crisis. What we know is that the latest Gallup polls show that there's a lack of engagement. Only 13% of the global workforce is engaged. 24% of the global workforce are actively disengaged, actively working against the best interests of your organizations. And maybe there were none in Brazil, but I think it's a global phenomenon. Now, this next study, and I think Anna already shared this, I heard her share 65% in Portuguese, but this is also, I mean, this is a really depressing statistic. 65% of employees would forgo a pay raise to see their leader fired. Is really actually quite depressing, but something that we should all pause and take thought. In addition to that, there was a McKinsey study that showed 77% of leaders, when they were asked, thought they did a pretty good job motivating and engaging their people. 82% of their people disagreed. And this is all despite $46 billion, and that's a conservative estimate. $46 billion is spent on leadership training annually. So the question that all of us should ask is, what are we getting from that return on investment? If we're spending so much time trying to develop ourselves and develop leaders, what are we actually getting for that? And this is really where our journey began. We really wanted to go on a search for evidence-based leadership, and partnering with HBR, we assessed over 35,000 leaders from 72 countries. We interviewed over 250 C-suite executives. We engaged leading researchers and also engaged many leading corporations. You see a number of them there. These are also clients of Potential Project, asking them to really help us understand in terms of what it takes to be a successful leader in the 21st century. And what we found was that there's really 3 keys to effective leadership in the 21st century. Those are mindfulness, selflessness, and compassion. And what I'll do in the rest of the session is I'll walk you through what each of these are. I'll give you a definition and actually give you a chance to be able to maybe experience. But ideally, what I'm hoping to do by the end of this session is give you at least 1 or 2 key takeaways, things that you could actually try out immediately for your own benefit in your own leadership journey. So to start out with this concept of mindfulness. So if we look at what does mindfulness mean, and to just kind of level set it, mindfulness, the way we look at it, is about being present, being fully focused on the task at hand or the people that we're with, but also being aware to make sure that we're focused on the right things. And when we talk to leaders about this is Dominic Barton. Some of you may know him. He's the former global CEO and managing partner for McKinsey & Company, global strategy company. And when we talked to Dom about being mindful, about being present, he said, first of all, Jacqueline, let me share with you a little bit about what my day looks like, what my life looks like. He travels over 250 days per year. He said he rarely sleeps in the same bed 2 nights in a row. His day starts at 7 a.m. with a breakfast meeting, and then he goes back to back to back to back to back all the way to 8 p.m. for a dinner meeting. At 9 o'clock, he's regimented. He does some exercise, then he checks in with his family before maybe checking a little bit of email, and then trying to get a good night's sleep before he starts the day all over again. He said his time is so precious. And I think maybe, again, you might not be able to relate to this, but you may be able to relate to the concept. His time is so precious that people actually book tickets on airlines just to be able to have the seat next to him, just to be able to have precious time to meet with him. And he said to us, if I am not present, I am wasting my time and everyone else's. That's what mindfulness means to me. And again, you may not be able to relate to Dom's schedule, but if you think about this idea, if you are not here now, you are wasting your time and everyone else's. And when we then turn to our data to look at what the experience is in terms of the leaders that we assessed in all of those different countries, what we found is that 73% of leaders feel unmindful most of the time. leading to 65% saying they often fail to complete their most important tasks. And 67% of the leaders that we assessed described their minds as being cluttered. One executive said to me, he said, Jacqueline, he said, it's like my brain is full, like there's no more space in my head for more information. And he shared that the scary thing is that when I look around the table at the other leaders that are around me, I think all their brains are full too. How are we going to address the challenges that we're facing in our industry if we're all walking around with full brains? And as a result of that, what we found is 96% of leaders said that they would like to be more mindful. Now, why is this? What's happening? What's driving us to be able to talk about this idea of mindfulness? And to get behind that is something called attention deficit trait. Many of you will probably be familiar with attention deficit disorder, a neurological condition making it difficult for us to manage our attention. Attention deficit trait has the exact same outcomes, but it's basically caused by our environment. Researchers studying our attention say that our ability to pay attention over the past decade is getting less and less and less. And I'll just ask out of curiosity if anybody would like to disagree with that statement, or if anybody would like me to repeat it. And it's just a little question because we know how difficult it is to pay attention. And the other interesting thing is, and I'll ask you to just take a moment to reflect on this, if I were to ask you to consider what percentage of time do you think you are not paying attention? What percentage of time would you think that is? And when we ask this in seminars and sessions around the globe, there's all kinds of ranges. Some people say they think it's 80%, some people think it's 30%. And what we found, and again, this is backed by science, is that 40 on average, and I know none of you are average, you wouldn't be here at HBR Week if you were, but on average, 47% of people, their mind is wandering 47% of the time. And what that means, just to make that really clear, is you're here, you're in this session, you're listening hopefully, but at some point your mind may have wandered, you may have left, you may be thinking about what might happen next or what other things you need to do outside of work, and you could even be looking right at the camera, looking right at the screen. It doesn't mean you're paying attention. And this is so important for us, not only, of course, as leaders, but also as leaders of people. We need to understand that this is not just our situation, but also how that looks like when we put it into the work context. And this is really what we see. It means that 53% of the time, we can be focused on the task at hand. We're mindful. We're making conscious choices. We have a sense of control. We're resilient. We're engaged. We can be creative. The rest of the time, not so much. We can be frenzied, we can be rigid in our thinking, we're disengaged, we're not very accepting of change. And so again, this gets back to a real business case for why it's so important to start paying attention to paying attention. And to do that, I want to do a little exercise, and we'll see how this works with the webinar. But what I want you to do is actually have a little bit of an experiment to see, that's all some interesting stats, but see how that actually relates for you. And the exercise is really quite simple. What I want you to do is I want you to pick one thought. And the rule is you can think about that thought and no other thoughts for 30 seconds. Ready, set, go. All right, and that was 30 seconds. Now I'll ask you, maybe Anna, maybe you'll play a little bit with me. What was that experience like for you?
Very hard, Jacqueline. It's very hard to keep just one thought in your mind. Only for 30 seconds, but I had to, to try hard to keep, try to do the exercise correctly. So, okay.
Right. And I'm sure you're not alone. I'm sure many of the people watching probably had the same experience. I've had people say to me, Jacqueline, that was the longest 30 seconds of my life. And it really is really interesting because, as you said, Anna, it was only 30 seconds, not even a full minute. And yet how interesting is it for us to have that little window of insight into how difficult it can be to focus on just one thought. And this, I think, is really interesting because I let you think about whatever you wanted to. You didn't have to think about work. We know that it's more difficult to think about things that we don't like to think about than it is to think about things that we do like to think about. But it's just so important for us to be able to understand how precious and how challenging it is for us to pay attention. And if we look at that, just to make it kind of a little bit fun in terms of a little cartoon form, let's say this is John here. John has a really important report that he needs to write, but where are his thoughts? Something else that he'd rather be doing. But here it's kind of interesting, you know, we follow John, here he is later in the day. Now he's doing that thing that he wanted to do, but where are his thoughts? Somewhere else. And this is the real one that I really want you to look at. How many of you can relate to this? You know, you finally get to that beautiful beach in Tahiti or wherever it might be, and you can't stop thinking about work. And what this really says, if you can relate to this at all, is that our minds are a little crazy. Often our minds are not where we need them to be. They're thinking about the past or the future, and they're not always here so that we can make the best use of our precious time to be able to enhance our performance, to be able to enhance the quality of our interactions with our people, but also even to be able to enjoy the precious time when we're not at work, when we need to recharge and recoup. So this really gets to this idea again, coming back to mindfulness. Another way of looking at mindfulness, another definition, is really the ability to be able to manage our attention, to be able to focus on the task at hand. We know that our mind naturally wanders and gets distracted. But basically, what we can do with mindfulness is we can go to the mental gym. We can actually train our brain to be able to be more focused. And what I'd love to do now is actually walk you through a brief mindfulness training exercise so that you have the opportunity to experience and get a little taste for it. So what I'll actually do is just to start off with, I want you to make sure that you're sitting comfortably in your chair. And I'll just invite you to take a moment to just notice the extent to which you're feeling relaxed in this moment. You may need to roll your shoulders a little bit or just to be able to get a little bit more comfortable. But the idea is to just notice from a physical perspective whether you're feeling relaxed and yet fully alert. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes or you can just keep them open, but at a downward gaze. I promise on this webinar I won't be staring at any of you. But just to be able to tune into just an opportunity to enter into the mental gym. And what I'd like to invite you to do is take an opportunity to focus on the experience of breathing. And the key thing here is just to simply observe the breath as it goes in and as it goes out. And if you need to, it might be helpful to even put a hand on your belly and you can just observe the rise and fall of the belly as the breath goes in and the breath goes out. And what's really important about this exercise is just to be clear, this is not a breathing exercise. So it's not about breathing long or breathing deep. It's an attentional exercise. We're training our attentional muscle, just using the breath as the object that we're choosing to focus on in this moment. And simply observing it as it is. And if it's helpful just to keep you on track, you can observe the breath going in and the breath going out. You can count silently to yourself 1. Observe the breath going in, going out, counting 2. And continue all the way up to 10. And when you get to 10, start counting backwards. 10, 9, 8, back down to 1. And continuing in cycles. And if at any point you get distracted by a sound, by a sensation, or more likely by a thought, I want you to celebrate that moment of mindfulness. Remember to relax, gently release the distraction, and return your attention to the breath, and simply start counting from 1 again. And when you're ready, letting go of the exercise and returning your attention here. And I hope it's okay, but I really do want to make this as interactive as possible. What I'd love to invite you to do is just to take 1 minute and turn to a neighbor. And I want you to share one thing that you liked about that practice, that exercise that we just did, and one thing that you found challenging. And Anna, I'll give you a chance to reflect on your thoughts, and then maybe just after giving people a chance to reflect, then I'll ask you to share your experience.
Okay, I usually do this. I try every morning, but I never can do every morning, but I really tried. What I think is very helpful because it's very relaxing.
Yes.
The longer I get what breath in and breathing out, I get more relaxed, and the longer the breath gets longer. So it's just like it's sending a message to the brain saying it's okay, it's okay. So, and the brain gets relaxed also. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I feel when I do that. The challenging part is exactly this, just to be mindful with the breathing. Because I know, I'm sure other people agree with me, it's very easy to get distracted. And thoughts come in, so do I have 5 more minutes? Do I have to go? I have something to do at work. I have to, things that we have to decide every day. So that's the hard part. But what I feel that is very good, usually I began doing that a while ago, and it gets easier with
Yes.
time. So I'm far from good, but I'm better than 6 months ago, I would say.
Wonderful, Anna. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm sure you are not alone in both finding, hopefully, many of you found that it's actually nice to have just a moment to just breathe, to just relax. And although it can seem very strange, especially at a work conference and also for the clients that we work with in the busy of daily work lives, but how precious it is to be able to have a moment to just settle your thoughts, be able to relax and invite a little bit more clarity of mind. But Anna, as you shared, and this is certainly what we find in working with senior leaders from around the globe, is the thoughts come in, the distractions, oh, did I remember to do this? And what if this? And how do I manage this? And what we really encourage people is 2 things. Is number 1, if you do have a lot on your mind, that's really good data for you. It's really good for us as leaders to know, wow, my brain, as I talked about earlier, is cluttered, is full. Because you may not want to have that critical conversations with one of your team members if you don't have a very clear mind. You may want to do some things to clear your thoughts before you engage in those conversations. So the first value of mindfulness can be just a check-in to be able to get a sense of how clouded is your mind, how relaxed are you right now, how focused are you. The second thing about it, and I loved what you shared, is that it does get easier. Many of you are probably familiar with neuroplasticity, but what we know is just like training any other muscle, our brain is plastic. So we can actually, by doing this exercise as simple as it sounds, simple in practice, not always easy to do because of the distractions, but it does get easier over time. And what we recommend is just 10 minutes of daily practice can actually rewire the brain to be able to help us to be more present, to be able to be more focused, to be able to be more effective as leaders, and also generally as human beings, because we're nicer to be with when we're actually there. And so there's just a lot of science that backs this up. In terms of, from a work-life balance perspective, people are more balanced if they're less cluttered. They can be more creative, better job satisfaction, better collaboration. But specifically, and again, this focus really is very much on leadership. What the research shows is, those leaders that are more mindful, they seem more grounded, more centered, more present. And you can even think about that from your experience. I mean, who would you rather work for? A leader that's distracted and her mind is wandering all over the place, or a leader that is truly present with you in this moment? But in addition to that, there's many other benefits of mindfulness practice, both in terms of the body and in terms of the mind. We know that it can help us to be able to get better sleep at night, clear the mental clutter, but also, enhance our memory and our cognitive function. So those are the things that I wanted to share. And again, I promised you that I'd try to give you some takeaways from today's webinar. If you are inspired to be able to try mindfulness training, if you haven't already experienced it, at the end of the session, I'll give you some information on where you can find and download a free app to be able to try a daily practice for yourself. But with that, I'd like to move on to selflessness. So selflessness, the way that we define it, is to basically not to let our own egoistic, and I'll say our own natural egoistic impulses rule the day, but to be able to see the bigger picture. And this was really interesting to us. This really came out from our research. We kept on hearing from so many of the C-suite executives that we met with of how challenging it is, but how important it is to be able to keep the ego in check. This is Jennifer Wu, the CEO and chairman of Lane Crawford Joyce Group in Asia. And she actually talked about that in her experience, she'd really started to see that as she rose up in the ranks of leadership, she recognized more and more of how important it was for her to keep her ego in check. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to get behind that and actually look. And what we found was that there's a lot of research that basically big ego equals big problems for us as leaders. And the research, the starting point for that is it makes us vulnerable to criticism. If I have a really big ego, like let's say if I think I'm a fantastic presenter and you all think I suck, I'm going to get hurt by that. That's going to be damaging to my ego. But if on the other hand, if I have, I think I'm doing my best to be of good service, to try to share with you and some ideas and some inspiration from our research and our experience, and you don't like what I'm saying, well, then at least it won't hurt so much. So if I have a big ego, I'm not always receptive to getting that amazing feedback that we know helps our development and helps our careers. In addition to that, we know that a big ego actually makes you vulnerable to manipulation. Again, if I have a big ego, you could say to me, Jacqueline, do this, it's going to make you look good. Or Jacqueline, don't do that, it's going to make you look bad. And I'll end up being a puppet to things that other people are trying to get me to do, not always making the best decisions for myself or necessarily for my organization. The other thing, and this is actually really, I think, critical for all of us as leaders, there should be a warning label that goes on anytime you get promoted as a leader, that warning, this could corrupt your behavior. What the research shows is that as we rise up in the ranks of leadership, basically we're more susceptible to be rude, to be selfish, all the way to unethical behavior. And if you're not really sure if this is true for you, I'll invite you to think about maybe that first time that you got that first promotion and you noticed, you walked, maybe you had a desk that was just a little bit closer to the window and you kind of had this sense of self-importance. And that's great. You are important. You've got an important role. But if you start to think you're more important than everyone else, you are not going to be able to be successful as a leader. In addition to that, the research shows that if we have a big ego, it actually narrows our vision, something called confirmation bias. We start to want to see the world the way that we want to see it. And this, particularly in this era, again, I'm not sure if this is as relevant in Brazil, but certainly in North America, but having our biases, if we see the world, if we're narrow in our vision, it prevents us from being able to have more diverse and inclusive teams. It just isn't very difficult, and it's all ego-based. So being able to get over ourselves, get over the way that we want to see the world, or get over the way that we think people should behave or act is a great way for us to break free, to be able to be more open to new ideas and new possibilities. And finally, it really puts you in a bubble. And this is really interesting. Not only does an ego for ourselves put us in a bubble, but the other thing that we heard again and again is that for us as leaders, we have to recognize that other people are going to put us in a bubble. You may have that experience where you know a leader that nobody tells them the truth. Nobody tells them what's actually going on because he or she is the boss. And that's so unhelpful, because if we as leaders don't create an environment where people will actually share with us their challenges, their concerns, things that aren't going well, we are basically not going to know what's actually going on in our organization. So it's so critical for us to recognize the bubble that we might create unintentionally or that other people might be creating for us, so we can break out of that to be a better leader for our people. And then just to dive into this idea a little bit more, a little interesting exercise, and again, to maybe have a little bit of fun with this, is to actually have the opportunity to try speaking selflessly. And what I'll invite you to do, and again, just give you a minute to be able to do this, I want you to just turn to a neighbor. And what I'd like you to do is just to tell your neighbor about your day. And again, the instructions are, and you'll pick somebody to go first, but the instructions basically are that you cannot use I, me, my, or mine. And I'll open it up and just give you a moment to just try that on your own. And then we'll take it up in just a minute. And I'll maybe let you have the opportunity to switch with your partner to let the other person have the experience and see what happens. And give another minute for that. All right, now I'll put you out of your misery and let you come back to the screen or misery. I hope you had fun with that exercise. If you're like most of the participants that we do this exercise, you probably found that weird and a little bit hard. And of course, it's set up to be a little bit difficult. I mean, we naturally have a self-referential perspective. I'm pretty sure that I was the one that woke up in my bed and had my breakfast, and none of you were there with me this morning when I did that. But what's interesting about this exercise is just to start to really give us an ability to be able to see how natural it is for us to have a self-referential view. And the invitation is really to challenge ourselves to see if more often, especially as leaders, can we get past that? Can we get past the I, the me, the mine, and actually start to look at more of us, more of we, and take a more other perspective? And again, there's research that really backs this up. One of the things we know is that active use of we, she, and you actually improves our happiness. And this is a really important study that I want to make sure that everybody's paying attention for this. Frequent use of I, me, and my is correlated to high blood pressure, heart disease, and mortality. So think about that the next time you want to talk about yourself. But the other thing is leaders that are using more inclusive terms are perceived as being better leaders. And it's just natural. It makes sense that we're a success if we're more other oriented. It also enables us to be able to have a greater engagement, more sense of belonging, more team citizenship behaviors, and a sense of recognition and innovation. And the tip here that I'd love to give you is just an invitation to maybe even take a moment and just to reflect on all of the people that support you in being successful. I mean, all of you, you wouldn't be here at this week if you weren't already an extremely successful leader. But I'm sure that all of you know that there are so many people that have supported your success. People that you actually know and can identify, but also so many people that support the success of your operation, of your team, of your organization, that you don't even think about on a regular basis. And my invitation to you to help you to be able to bring more selfless leadership behaviors is to bring more humility and more gratitude into your day-to-day leadership. And with that, I'll turn to the last leg of our stool, basically compassion. And for that, the definition that I'd like to introduce you to is this idea of the intention to be of benefit to others. And before you start thinking, oh, this sounds all soft and flaky, compassion, that sounds all wimpy, what I wanted to share with you is that we were so inspired by the leaders that we interviewed because they talked to us again and again about how compassion is not weak, compassion is actually hard, and compassion is critical to business success. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, this is Arne Sorensen. He's the CEO of Marriott. Some of you may be familiar. Marriott, with their recent acquisition of Starwood, is now the largest hotel chain in the world with over 750,000 employees around the globe. And Arne shared with us, he talked to us, he said, in 1927, when J.W. and Alice Marriott founded, actually it was just a 9-stool pop shop in Washington, D.C., they recognized at that point that if they didn't take care of their people and take care of their people first, their business was not going to be successful. And their mantra, and this is not an HR philosophy, this is their business philosophy, is if we take care of our people, they will take care of our guests and business will take care of itself. And this is really the foundation of what we found and what we heard about people, putting people at the center of our strategy, creating more people-centric organizations, because just like Arnie articulated, it's your people that are serving your customers. It's your people that are making your products. If you are not taking care of your people, they are not going to be able to deliver good service and good products to your people. And what we found, again, to be able to unpack this just a little bit more, is that compassion isn't just good on its own. Compassion needs to be combined with wisdom. We need to be smart about how we apply compassion to organizations. And specifically what we looked at, and you can see that in this matrix, is the difference between basically having compassion versus being indifferent, but also this idea of being able to bring wisdom into our leadership and our organizations as opposed to ignorance. And what we found is that there are some leaders that are, super kind and super caring, but they do it in not necessarily the smartest ways. And an example of that would be, let's say, if I really needed some feedback and you said, oh, but that's going to hurt my feelings. That is not helpful to me. That is not wise compassion. That's basically being naive. In the next quadrant, we did actually hear about a lot of leaders that are not that smart and not that caring, and there's really nothing good to say about that. So I'll actually just move on to the next quadrant. This was the one where we really saw some interesting things. Leaders that were super smart, had strong business acumen, but basically didn't fundamentally care about their people. And the key thing that we found is their people knew. I mean, we as human beings, we know if somebody doesn't really care about us. And what we found is that these leaders could be successful, but only for a short period of time. People would stay with them. They certainly wouldn't go to the wall for them. They would leave if they could, and they would certainly try to stab them in the back if they possibly had the chance. And this was really important to us, because what we then wanted to explore was this idea of combining wisdom and compassion and really bringing more benevolent leadership into our day-to-day leadership. And as I said, really putting people at the center of our strategy, but doing it in smart ways. Sometimes you do need to let somebody go, but do it in a way that is caring about them as a human being, because fundamentally we all should care more about each other, even though in business we need to make tough decisions. And again, the research really backs this out. What we saw is that leaders that are compassionate are perceived as being stronger and better leaders. They're able to create organizations that have a more altruistic culture, where people will go above and beyond the call of duty, not only within the organization, but beyond. And it also gives people a great sense of pride. Compassion makes people feel more valued and more proud of their organization. And ultimately creating stronger connections between people, better collaboration, higher trust, enhanced loyalty, and lower employee turnover. So to kind of wrap it all up, and then I'll turn it over and open it up to Anna if you have any questions. But one of the things that we found, and this is kind of a summary statement, this is Javier Clodville, an automotive executive in Europe, and he basically said to us when we asked, tell us about leadership in the 21st century. And he said leadership today, from his perspective, is about unlearning management and relearning being human. And for us, putting people at the center of our strategy and developing our minds, developing ourselves to bring more mindfulness, basically being more present, being more other-oriented, and being more compassionate is the way to help us to bring more humanity, more truly human leadership into our day-to-day leadership, to not only help ourselves be successful, but to help our people thrive, and to ultimately be able to help our organizations to be able to realize outstanding results. If you'd like to find out more, you can go to our website, www.themindoftheleaderbook.com. And as I mentioned, you can actually find a link to an app there. If you've been inspired by any of the practices that I've talked to you about or any of the tips, you'll find more information there. You see some information about the book. And then also, as I said, I just share my email. Again, I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to be there in person, but I would love to hear. Please go ahead. You're welcome to reach out to me. We'd love to hear from you if you are inspired at all by what we talked about today, but also see how it relates to you and your countries. And Anna, I'll turn it back up to you now to see if you have any questions for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacqueline. I do have one question that let's see what you can give me, but you talk a lot about us, people, how we should be responsible for the way we act in our personal lives and in our professional lives, which I think it's perfect. We do our lives, we're responsible for it. But since we're talking about business and organizations, My question would be, what companies could do in a daily life basis to really help their employees and their leaders to practice those things that are so important for them personally, but also in order to be more productive with, at the end of the day, it's good for the companies, right? So what they can do, I know there are some initiatives in some companies, but you know, they get lost in the middle of things. It's not mainstream. So how to be mainstream, this new approach?
Yeah, Anna, thank you so much. I love the question. And one of the things that I'll say, you know, many organizations that we see around the globe are talking about mindfulness and bringing in mindfulness programs, and they're seeing it part of their wellness strategy. And we think that's good and great. There's lots of benefits to these practices from a wellness and employee health and well-being. What I would say though, and really to your question, is to reflect on the business benefits of this. I mean, you guys are leaders of an organization. You have a responsibility to your shareholders if you have shareholders, but to really look at this from a bottom line perspective. And the question, and this is what we ask our clients, is there a business case? Is there business value to you in having your people be more present, be more about the team, and be more kind to each other? And then what is that business case? What would that actually look like? And I can take just the most simplest example of making this practical and making this applied. When we look at so many organizations today, we ask them about their meeting culture. And in so many organizations, meetings are not the most productive places. People are distracted, meetings take too long, people are doing other things. And the invitation is just if you wanted just the simplest return on investment of bringing a little bit more mindfulness and applying it to your day-to-day business and work life, imagine what it would be like if everybody was actually more attentive in a meeting. And what we found, and this is based on, you know, research from Accenture, from McKinsey, from Lego, from IKEA, from Microsoft, from many of our global clients, is that they're actually able to reduce their meeting time by up to 30%, just because people are actually more present. People are actually there. And so for us, in answer to your question, we of course very much value these qualities because we think that they're good for us as human beings. But we really encourage organizations to look at the business case and then actually design the program to be able to help support business results. And then, in addition, the side benefits is we also benefit in terms of overall wellness and our personal lives.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. What I can say, it was very helpful to me, and I'm sure that it was very helpful for everybody who's listening to us. So thank you very much again for accepting our invitation. And I really hope you can be here with us next year in person, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much. Have a great week, everyone.
Ok. Pessoal, aqui nós acabamos de falar com a Jacqueline Carter e eu espero ver vocês amanhã, a partir de 9 da manhã, na Fê Comércio, dia 9, onde nós vamos ter os 2 dias presenciais dessa nossa HBR Week Brasil de 2019. Serão vários temas, todos eles ligados à gestão empresarial, e eu tenho certeza que vai ser muito útil para todos. Espero vê-los lá. Até logo.